Okay, well tonight we're going to talk about our dash air blower motor, and I guess the heater blower motor, whatever you want to call it. The blower that is located right there, just in front of the passenger seat. Well, I'm fixing to remove that because I'm getting calls where people from these motors are beginning to fail, and the bushings are wearing out of them after all these years in our vintage anyway. Because this is being a 2005, people calling me, it's got 2004, 2003s, and the motors quit turning, and you take it apart, and the bushing just flat wore out of it. So before mine wears out, I'm going to take it apart and lubricate it. And I'm going to show you how to do that. But I thought before I do that, I was wanting to do an amp draw because I want to do an amp draw before and after. So I've got my little amp gauge up here so I can see what's going on. And a few videos back, if you remember, I changed it. Remember from the factory we had these spade connectors, and those spade connectors were getting loose and arcing, melting the wires, getting very hot, causing a fire hazard. So since I got all that took care of, so I've got my gauge here, amp gauge, over my high-speed blower wire. I'm going to turn it on and we'll see what kind of amps we're drawing. Alright, so that's on high. We're pulling about a 17 amp draw. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to pull this blower motor out and what we're going to do to try to lube it up and get longer life out of it. Well, let me see. We're here. Pretty simple ordeal. Now, your RV may be slightly different, but with mine I just had this little panel. Put my big finger out of the way. Mine I just had this panel to get out of the way. So you have to sometimes dig for the screw. See how the screw can be buried in the carpet. Well, the way mine worked out, it was easier for me to take these two screws loose from the back side that go into the wall right down in there. But on this part, I was able to feel around in the carpet, found the screw head, and backed it out. And the screw comes through right there and goes into that little aluminum piece. So you get the idea. So we'll get that out of our way. Then it gives you really easy access to the blower. Let's see if I can get a light on here. There we go. And I don't know, I think there's maybe 6 Phillips screws we need to remove. We got this little connector. There's a little lever you'll see right there. You just lift up on that little lever. Come on, there we go. Lift up on that little lever and pull that connector loose. And then you got this little rubber hose. I guess to me, I think it's like a cooling hose. It blows air into that motor to keep it cool, because that's the only thing that makes any sense to me. So, and it just should just pop out. So cold today. There it goes. So that's all that is. That's all that does. Where's it at? Oh, there it is. There that is. So I got me a Phillips screwdriver. I'm gonna take these screws out, and I'll be right back with you. It won't take but just a second. Okay, you see I got all the screws out of it, and it just slides right out. Easy peasy. That looks pretty good. Not dirty or anything. The bearing seems tight. I'm going to take that into the heated garage here in a minute. We'll tinker with that. I'll just show you what's inside here. And see, there's that little, where's that plastic pipe at? Right there it is. On the back side, on the back side in here, it's like a little air scoop. So it grabs the air and directs it into that pipe. That goes into this little hose, and then blows air into the back of the motor to help to keep it cool. So that's kind of how that works. And you can see your door in there. I guess that, what does that do? Does that open up the, is that the fresh air opening? It might be. Not very sure which one that is. Because you got a door there, and we've got a door down here. So I think we've got about 3 different doors in this particular one. Anyway, we'll take it to the bench, and we'll take this thing a little apart and see if we can't lube it up. Okay, now we're in a nice warm garage, and all it needs is just a 3/8 socket, 3/8 wrench. Take the little lock nut off, and for me, mine just came right off. It was no issue whatsoever, just like that. Now, if you have trouble with yours, you know, you could always put a little penetrating oil down there. And then if you have like 2 large screwdrivers, put one on each side, apply a little even pressure at the same time on both sides so you don't rock it sideways and crack it. But yours hopefully will come off nice and easy like mine did. So got that. So you can see on this side we got that big, probably like a bronze bearing. Sometimes they're called like an oil light bearing. Sometimes these little bearings are made out of like a form of powder, and they kind of absorb the oil. So with this, I got the idea. I'm going to use this putty stuff here. I've got it underneath my little furnace here, is blowing out nice warm heat. Real little furnace, so it's getting it good and soft. So my plan is I'll make me a little putty dam around here and put me some 20 weight oil. Let it sit overnight. Let it work its way into that bearing. That's the easy part. The other part, a little bit more of work, because this side, of course, is sealed up. So I'm gonna get me a drill bit and pierce me a little hole in here, because you can look inside, you can see the bearing right there. It is so easy to get to. So I'll pierce me a small hole. Probably do this side first, because then once I'll seal the hole back up, then flip it back over and then do the other side. So let me find a drill bit and let's punch this a hole. Okay, I took me a sharp punch, tapped me a little punch in there just to get started, and put me a little paper towel in there to keep any metal shavings out. And I got me a small drill bit, and we're just going to do this. That went. Ta-da! Nice. Okay. Okay, so you can see the shaft, I think so. Yeah, see it turning right there? So we just got a little space in there to get an oil in it. So shouldn't take too much, but what I've got here, I've got this Zoom oil. I use this a lot for my electric motors, HVAC blowers and stuff like that. But I've actually used up my regular oil, and I've replaced it with some 20 weight synthetic. I had this left over from my go-kart racing days, and so I'm just going to use that instead. But this little spout comes in handy. But yeah, I don't know if I can do this in one hand or not. I better get 2 hands on that, because I'm surely going to make a mess. Let me try that first. All right, I'm going to try this in one hand. We'll see how it works. See, I'm making a mess. I knew I would. But that's all right. I can wipe it off. Ain't no big deal. I may apply 12 volts to this to spin it, get it warmed up. That heat will help pull that oil down into the bearing. Okay, check out what I'm doing. I got me a battery here, and I'm letting it run. It's been running a good 15 minutes, and it's slowly warming up, but I was kind of surprised. See the outside sheet metal here, well, we're about 62 degrees. But up here by the bearing, see, we're finally getting up. We're getting about 83 degrees, slowly warming up. And so you can see the shaft in there spinning away. And I'll take a little more oil, put a little dab on it here, and kind of pulls it in. Let me get me some putty, make me a little. I'll make something. Let me try something here. I didn't think of the word earlier. This is called butyl tape. This is you put this around your windows and stuff, like around RVs, and you take the window out. And see what I've done here? Give me a little spot. So now let's squirt some oil in there and see what it does. Let it work its way in. That'll get some good lubrication on it that way. So it just dawned on me why we're not heating up this motor, because one thing, we're probably not pulling no amps at all, because we don't have this big blower wheel. You put that blower on there, man, it really pulls that motor down, makes it work hard. So that thing's just freewheeling right now with hardly no load at all. That's probably why we're not generating a whole lot of heat in that motor, which is fine. I don't want it to get cranking hot anyway. So all right, so I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to just let that sit for the night, let it creep in around that bearing, and then I'll seal that off tomorrow. Then I'll flip it over and I'll do the other side. Kind of do it the same way, let that oil creep down into that bearing, and Then I'll do a test when we put it back in the RV. I might run it without the blower wheel, just kind of my curiosity, see what the amp draw is. Then put it all back together and see what the amp draw difference is, if any, between the old bearings before and after lubrication. Well, it's the next day. You can see the oil's all creeped down in that little hole. Well, that looks good. I'm sure that bearing's, and I double checked. I looked up inside that hole. It didn't, no oil came through and got onto the winding or anything. So that should be good, and I'll seal this up and I'll flip it over and we'll do the other side. So here's what I come up with. I got me some real sticky tape. This stuff is called, just something I had laying around here. There it is, flex tape. Really sticky stuff. Probably any tape will do, but I grabbed a little piece of that, sealed up that hole. So now I can flip the motor over and I can do the other side. And if by chance you've taken your motor off and you found that bearing is starting to have some wear on it and it's moving around on you, then you're going to replace your motor anyways. So if that's the case, here's the part number to it, and I'll put a link to it below this video. 030-00137, Unimotor, made in Canada. So in case you need one. But you may ask yourself, well, why am I going through all this trouble? Well, one reason is I don't like surprises. And with RVs, you're always getting surprises. But you don't have to. There's some things you can kind of give a preemptive strike to. Things that you know that are going to wear out. It's just a matter of time. And, if it's a 100-degree day and you're in the middle of the desert and this motor fails on you, you're going to wish you took the time to do this. Same way in the wintertime. If that motor fails, you're not going to get no dash heat coming out. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Give me some of my butyl tape here. I'll make me a little dam. I'll put oil around it and let it soak into this bearing, and then we'll put it back in the RV, and I should be in good shape for a good long time. Okay, I got it fired up. Let it warm up a little bit. Let's put a little this 20 weight oil in there and see how it acts. There it goes. Well, working that bearing. But in case you couldn't hear over the noise of that motor, you can see what I've done. Added oil into it. I'll let that sit overnight, and we should be good to go come tomorrow. So it's the next day, and you can see how the oil I put in there slowly creep down into the bearing. So it should be in good shape. And also, because you may not have this stuff here, which is called butyl tape, you may have to get creative. You can use some Play-Doh or some silly putty, or just get your big wad of chewing gum, chew it up real good, and make you a little same thing. So just peel that off, wipe that down a little bit. So we'll take it back to the RV. I'm gonna do a test first. I'm gonna do an amp test with no blower wheel, just satisfy my curiosity, and we'll put all this back together. All right, I told you I was gonna do a test. So you see I've got it plugged up with no blower wheel. Now, notice the amp difference here. I'm gonna turn it on for you. Get it where you can see it. There we go. Good shot. See what an amazing difference? Without that blower wheel, without the blower wheel, when we pull 2 amps. So what a difference it makes compared to what was like 17 when I started. So I suspect we still may have 17, but I don't know if that oil is going to make any difference or not, but we'll soon find out. Okay, bear with me because I'm kind of standing on my head underneath there. You see where I'm at. You see that's the blower motor hole right there. There's the carpet. That's the passenger's feet, and this is the intake. When you're when you're running max AC, the air is being drawn through this grill. In fact, this little plastic grill. I'll pull back a little bit so you can see what I got here. Should look familiar to you, but this will pop out. Get your finger in there, right? There we go. So that comes out of the way. And then you take a peek and make sure everything's, see something, there's a piece of foam or something I need to get out of there. But now, if you happen to have pets, you may find you have a truckload of hair in there. And you want to get all that vacuumed out, cleaned out. Of course, if there's something else you could do is come back with a little filter, wrap a filter around this. Something, like those little foam filters you get for window unit air conditioners. You don't want something very restrictive, but at least something to keep the dog hair out. But if you happen to have a pet that likes to lay in this area, you're probably going to find a lot of hair. up inside there, and that's going to restrict your airflow and reduce your cooling. So I got to get my little hands in there and pull out that foam. It's like that piece right there. All right, so let me get that cleaned out, and I'll get this blower put back in. Okay, see, I'm about to get it all buttoned up. I just got to tighten the screws up now. Just remember to hook your air hose or your air cooling tube up, plug your connector back up. You see my little piece of tape where I covered up my hole where my oil fill was that I made. So I'll finish tightening up these screws and we'll do an amp load test. Okay, it's time for our test. It's all back together now. So our amp load may be just a little bit better than what it was. I think I was closer to 17 something. So maybe dropped a half amp possibly. But I was also going to mention what a great tool these are. I think it's maybe $30 something or something. But especially for measuring DC amp loads, I'll put a link to this little tool. Very, very handy to have. And if you remember a couple of videos back, and if you want to do this, check on the high side. And I am kind of curious if anybody else does this. If you could chime in, let me know what your amp load is. Are you seeing the same amps that I'm seeing? Because remember, this circuit is on a 30 amp circuit. And if you see my video, a couple of videos back about the possible dash fire, because I had these wires that was feeding the blower was getting so hot they was melting. And the reason being because the spade connector was losing connection and is arcing and generating heat. So I got rid of the spade connectors and put in these a lot heavier, like this block, where I could crimp the screws down good. And now the wires don't get hot. I shouldn't have any more problems. But the blue wire is your high-speed wire. I believe that would be true on most Workhorse chassis. So give that a try and let me know what you come up with. And I'll put a link to this and also put a link to a blower motor in case you take your blower motor out and you find that the bearing has some wear in it already. And it's starting to wear out. Go ahead and replace it so you don't have this kind of problem on the road. Anyhow, I guess that'll do it. Thank you all for watching. Have a blessed night. See you. Bye.